Year 3-4, it's Mrs. Tomlinson, and I'm very excited to be reading you Chapter 9 of Oliver and the Seawigs. And I believe we are just up to a very exciting bit where Oliver has reached the evil island Thirlstone to try and save his mum and dad. So this is the first page, and that is a picture of inside the Thirlstone. Up and up went Oliver through the maze of the bad island's empty heart. It was not like climbing through a person's insides. That would have been horrid. Everything seemed to be made of stone. The only thing that told Oliver he was inside a living being was that sometimes, when he set his foot down or grabbed an out-jutting bit of passage wall, the whole lot twitched. The Thirlstone was ticklish, it seemed. Oliver tried to use only the weeds and ferns as handholds once he'd worked that out. Not all of them had deep roots. Twice he nearly fell, while leaves and clumps of rooty earth went tumbling down the shaft to spatter into the black pool where the squid and octopuses were waiting, tentacles crossed, hoping that he'd fall. But Oliver was a good climber. All the mountains and crags had lost temples he'd climbed with his mum and dad. All the mountains and crags and lost temples he'd climbed with his mum and dad had made sure of that, and before long he was at the top. He crawled out of a crack in the summit of the Thirlstone. The water mole and the other shipwrecks loomed over him. Monkey drums boomed and stone xylophones clattered. The monkeys were having a wild old time, dancing round their fire, toasting sea anemones on sticks, and painting glasses and moustaches on the old stone heads. None of them noticed Oliver as he crept like a damp ghost between the trees. Soon he reached the temple. Outside its great stone entrance was a pool, and on the pool the 2 glass globes that held his parents floated. Mr. and Mrs. Crisp were asleep, huddled in the bottoms of the globes, which clinked gently against each other from time to time, like wine glasses. "Mum!" called Oliver softly. "Dad!" They did not stir. Poor things, they were just as exhausted as Iris after all their adventures. "Mum!" he shouted, wading into the pool and banging his fist against the globes. Still his parents did not wake, although Dad rolled over and muttered something in his dreams. But someone had heard Oliver. A voice from behind him said, "Ha!" He turned around. There stood Stacy de Lacy with his army of monkeys around him. There is Stacy de Lacy. Some of them were still beating their drums and banging their xylophones. One held a tray of biscuits, another a cool drink for Stacy, and 2 others fanned him with big peacock feather fans. The rest were just bibbling about like mad wind-up toys, full of excitement at all the mischief that lay ahead. "You," said Stacy de Lacy, pointing rudely at Oliver. "So here you are, come to thieve and sneak and spoil my plans." "I just want my mum and dad back," Oliver promised. "Well, you can't have them," jeered Stacy. "The Thirlstone needs them. They are the finishing touches on his wig. They could make all the difference. They're just the sort of thing that will make him stand out." "But why do you care so much about the Thirlstone winning?" Oliver asked miserably. "Ah," said Stacy de Lacy, "we've got a deal, me and the Thirlstone. If I help him win this Seawig thing, then he'll help me. Imagine the power I'll have with this great big giant at my command, and other rambling isles will follow the Thirlstone when they see his wonderful wig. The winner of the Seawigs night is a sort of king. They'll have to do as he says. We'll stomp New York and smash London, sit on Shanghai. The whole world will tremble before us. Nobody will dare say I've got a girly name then." "But you have got a girly name," grumbled Oliver. "Monkeys!" howled Stacy de Lacy. Oliver tried to fend the monkeys off, but soon he was pinned down under a gibbering heap of them. Meanwhile, some others had gone rushing into a side chamber of the temple and reappeared bowling a 3rd glass globe. Some held it steady while the rest unscrewed its lid. Then Oliver was monkey-handled into it and the lid screwed shut behind him. Stacy de Lacy grinned in at him, his leering face stretched out of shape by the thick glass. "Now the Thirlstone's wig is finished," he chortled. "Not just 2 stupid crisps, but the whole set." Twittering with mischief, the monkeys rolled Oliver away. Mr. and Mrs. Crisp had been woken by the noise and were sitting up inside their globes, watching sadly as their son was trundled past them. "I'm sorry," mouthed Oliver through the glass. A wreath of dark rocks rose from the hallowed shallows, with the waves breaking whitely around it. Wet stones shone in the moonlight. The mermaids scrambled through the surf and up and onto the reef's rocky ledges. There they sat, each with her comb and her mirror and her long hair blown sideways on the breeze. Their plump choirmaster bobbed like a seal in the waves and clapped his hands to get the mermaids' attention. "Just time for a quick practice, girls! Sing up!" So they sang, and their voices blended with the voices of the sea and wind. All over the hallowed shallows the rambling owls forgot their nervousness and listened. Up on the Fellstone's head, Oliver and his mum and dad heard that song, and it sent shivers rippling down their spines. They couldn't listen for long, though. They were busy being rolled across the Fellstone's summit by these monkeys and dangled over its edge. "Stop, stop, stop!" the fat merman shouted, clapping his hands over his ears. The song of mermaids was meant to sound strange and unearthly, but not this strange and unearthly. "Someone's singing flat," he said accusingly, glaring at the row of singers. Iris knew it was her. She blushed deep red. The merman spotted her and pointed. "You! Sing for me!" Iris drew a deep breath and sang as loudly and sweetly as she could. An awful strangled note emerged, so piercing that the nearest mermaid's mirrors cracked. "Stop! Stop!" the merman shouted. "What a disgraceful racket! What were you thinking of joining our choir with a voice like that? Be off with you!" Iris started to explain that she hadn't meant to join the choir at all, then decided that there wasn't time and splashed back into the sea. She couldn't imagine why she'd wanted to find her way home to all these silly mer-people. Her new friends were much more fun. All she cared about now was rescuing Oliver. And there's the mermaids with their... Ooh, what terrible noise is that? And there is Iris. And I think I also forgot to show you the picture of poor Oliver and his mum and dad being rolled by the monkeys. So that is the end of chapter 9.